Hi, my name is Ralph Cadalzo. I will be your instructor for IT Elective 3 or your game analysis and design. For Module 4, our topic is regarding the introduction to GameMaker Studio. For the objectives, learn about what is GameMaker Studio and what is its purpose and usage. Learn how to set up the development environment of GameMaker Studio on your computer or laptop. Familiarize the GameMaker Studio development environment and its graphical user interface. Learn the basic components that are required to use in creating a simple game using GameMaker Studio. And lastly, develop a beginner-level game using GameMaker Studio. First, introduction to GameMaker Studio. GameMaker Studio offers an intuitive and easy-to-use drag-and-drop interface of action icons that allows you to start on creating your own games very quickly. You can import and create images and sounds to use in objects and then instantly see the result of your actions at the press of a button. Obviously, you want to get started as quickly as possible. GameMaker Studio is bundled with a number of tutorials and demos which can import and use. You can import and use to get straight to work. These tutorials contain many sprites and graphics which are designed as placeholders to get you going, but they are not for use in any finished product. It should be noted that the GameMaker Studio focuses on two-dimensional games, and many great games use 2D sprite technology, even though they look very 3D when playing. This is a sample screen capture of the GameMaker Studio. This is the user interface that will be interacting with the software. As mentioned previously, you need to assign images, or we call sprites, and other things to objects, which are easily defined in your game through the DND action icon to give them properties and behaviors, after which you place them in a room along with the backgrounds and other things to give your game a look and feel you want. In these rooms that the game takes place, they can be considered as essentially as levels to your game. If you master the D&D interface and how it works to control basic settings in your objects, you can then move on to the easy-to-learn programming language, GML, which gives you much more control over every aspect of your GameMaker Studio. For the installation and requirements, any computer that is less than 5 years old should be able to run GameMaker Studio without any problems. But here are the minimum specs for your PC to use the program, and the necessary specs for each of the additional modules that you may have. Important. The required SDK, or the software development kit, and OS given for each platform may be different at the time of use due to changes made between the updates of your GameMaker. First, for Windows, GameMaker Studio requires a reasonably modern PC running at least Windows XP, Vista 7 or later. A DirectX 9 or later compatible graphics card with at least 32 MB of memory is required for most games, or for most created games. It requires a screen resolution at least of 1024 by 768 and 16-bit color. But preferably 32-bit color is preferred. It is always recommended that you make sure that you have the most recent drivers installed for your system. GameMaker Studio requires DirectX version 9.0 or later to be installed on your computer. When designing and testing games, the memory requirement can be pretty high, at least 128 MB and preferably more. But this depends on the operating system. When just running games, the memory requirements are less severe and depend on a lot of type of game as well as the resources being used. Okay, now I'll be showing you how to install your GameMaker Studio. First, you'll be needing the download link. Okay, I'll be providing you the download link for you to download the GameMaker Studio. I uploaded a copy of my GameMaker Studio onto my Google Drive, so I'll be sharing the link to this Google Drive in the link below. Okay, for the installation, the first step that we're going to do is we'll be running this GameMaker Studio cleanup. This application will be deleting all the previous files that you have for your previous installation of GameMaker Studio. After running this application, then we'll be running this installer for your GameMaker Studio. First, let's clean up the previous files and registries from this computer. We'll run this file. Okay. After running this file, there will be a pop-up window. So it will be instructing you to press any key to continue. So just press any key. Then this application now will start to delete folders of previous GameMaker application that you've installed, all the registries of your previous GameMaker. So once the cleanup is done, just press enter to exit the application. Then we'll be proceeding to the installation of your GameMaker Studio. So we'll run the installation, okay? Just double click it or run your installer, then it will be starting to install. Now, so for the installation, just click next for the installation wizard. Okay, then it will be asking you if you accept the terms and agreements for the usage of GameMaker. So we'll click I accept the terms and click next. Then after that, it will be prompting you to the destination folder or the installation folder of your GameMaker Studio. If you want to change this, go ahead, or you can leave this as default, then click next. So after that, okay, so your application now is ready to install. Just click install. Okay, then it will be copying, installing the files for your GameMaker Studio on your computer. So it will take a few seconds for it to finish. So after the installation, make sure to click the checkbox to launch the program and click the finish button. Okay, so it will take a few seconds for the initial startup of your application. So once the application is started, you will be prompted with this window. So this is now your GameMaker Studio. Okay, so after the installation of your GameMaker, we'll be proceeding with the global idea of what a GameMaker is, or what GameMaker Studio is. So games created with GameMaker Studio takes place in one or more rooms. These rooms are flat, two-dimensional spaces, but they can contain 3D-looking graphics as well depending on how you use them. So in these rooms, you can place objects which can define them, which you can define within the program. So typical objects can be walls, moving balls, the main player control character, enemies, and anything else that you can think of from games that you have played before. So some objects like walls can sit there and don't do anything, while other objects like the main player control character will move around and react to the input received by the player using keyboard, mouse, or the joystick. So for example, when the main character meets an enemy, he might die or he might fight the enemy and score points. As you can see, objects are the most important ingredients of games made with GameMaker Studio. Now, we'll be proceeding with objects and rooms. So first of all, most objects when placed as instances within a room need some image to make them visible on screen. So basically, objects are non-visible components of GameMaker Studio, but we can show your objects by using images we call sprites. So a sprite a sprite is often not a single image, but a set of images that are shown one after the other to create an animation. And in this way, it can look like a character is walking, or ball is rotating, or an enemy is exploding. So we have an example of your sprite here. So below we have series of images. We have 10 images in here. Okay, so these images, okay, are what we call sprites. So we use this image to create an animation of a character that will look like something like this when you play your game. So this image is like a GIF, or is a GIF image animated using this series of images. So we'll be using the same concept. If you want to create a moving character using sprites, okay, we'll be needing series of images that will be displaying onto the game to make your character move. So for an object to actually do something, we need to give it actions, but we also need to tell when to complete these actions. So to do that, we use events. So an event is a special moment in which we can place certain actions and be sure that those actions will only happen when that event is triggered. So there are a large number of different events that can take place and a large number of different actions that you can let your objects take too. So for example, there is a create event that is performed only when the object gets created. So another example of an event is called collision event. This is triggered when two instances of an object collide in the game room. This is an example of a screen capture of a object properties. So we'll be seeing several items in here. So first of all, we'll be seeing the name of your object in here. Okay, so the assigned sprite for that object. So some properties like the visibility, persistence, solid, uses physics, etc., etc. In this column, you'll be seeing the different events or the events that will be triggering the actions for that object. So let's say, for example, we have an event that is left press. So let's say, for example, the user left press your object, it will be triggering these actions. Okay, these actions are drag and drop from this part of your window. So we have several groups of events and commands that you have in here. All you need to do now, is drag these actions, okay, corresponding to these events to create the or to simulate programming, okay, in GameMaker Studio. So there's no need to code everything, or there is no need to code. Everything that you need to do is to drag the actions from this actions panel. Once you have defined your objects, it is time to define the rooms in which they will be placed. Rooms can be used for levels in your game or to show information or even hold a start menu. So there are actions to go from room to room so that you can create button objects that will move the player from one room to the other room. So you can add backgrounds that can be either a simple color or an actual image. Backgrounds can actually made to be to do a lot of things, but for the time being, just consider it as something that makes the room look nice. So you can place one or multiple instances of any objects you have created into the room. So this is a screen capture for your room properties. So for the room properties, basically the first thing that you need to do is you need to define a background. Okay, so let's say you want to add an image as your background, then you'll be doing that here in your properties window. You can also position the image that you'll be using for your room, define its position using the X and Y parameters, etc., etc. So once you have completed the design of your rooms, you are ready to run the game. So the first room to be shown is always the first room in the main list of the rooms, and it will be run at the start. Okay, so that's for the GameMaker Studio overview. Now, we'll be proceeding with the list of items that you need to familiarize yourself in order for you to create games efficiently in GameMaker Studio. So what are these? So sprites. Sprites are images often animated that are used to represent the objects. Sound can be used in games as either background music or sound effects. Backgrounds. Still images used as a background for the rooms. Paths. This can be used to make instances move along a predefined path. So basically, we'll be using this to animate your objects. Scripts. A script is a piece of code to which you give name and use like GML function. So this is the programming language that we'll be using for GameMaker Studio, but we'll be using minimal amount of this language. We'll be focusing on the drag and drop functionality of your GameMaker Studio. So fonts to draw text in the game, you can add fonts of many different styles. So timelines can be used to control the precise moment in a game that things should happen. Okay. Objects, which are the building blocks on which your game is built, and rooms, the space or levels in which the objects are placed. Now let's continue with the graphical user interface of your GameMaker Studio. So as you seen previously, so this is a screen capture of what your GameMaker Studio will look like. Okay, so let's grab that. Okay, so this is your application now. So we have different tabs in here. So welcome, open, up until to licenses. So now, at the top of the general startup screen, you can see that there are 9 tabs. Okay, so that will be your welcome, open, new, import, release notes, demos, tutorials, news, and licenses. So what are these? So welcome. This is the startup screen you will see upon when opening up GameMaker Studio. At the bottom, you can see a list of previously opened files. Okay, so it will be listed in here. So under the recent files part. Open. Here you can browse your computer for files to open. Okay, let's say for example you have previous GameMaker files. that you want to open. Okay. We also have new. This will ask you to select the directory you wish to use for a new project and prompt you to enter a name for this project, which is then saved and opened in the main GameMaker Studio runner. So import, you can load up the compressed or the .gmz project file and also import GameMaker files created with other versions of GameMaker Studio. Release notes. If you click on the button, you can see the releases notes for each the release versions of GameMaker Studio. So these notes outline all the bugs, fixes, and the changes that you have been incorporated into the program. So let's say, for example, we click this one, okay? So this is the version number and the series of bugs fixed for this particular version, okay? Then we also have your demos. This will allow you to view demo files that come with GameMaker Studio. Now let's proceed with this one. So let's say I'll be clicking the demos tab, okay? You'll be seeing some games or some files, okay, that are included in the installer. So you can use this one to see or to check what are the capabilities of your GameMaker Studio can do. So let's say, for example, we have your Angry Cats physics demo. So this is a demo of a game that will be showing you that physics is possible to use in GameMaker Studio. So this is, or upon clicking that project demo, okay, so you'll be prompted with this one. So if you want to run this demo, we'll be proceeding here. So just click this button to run the game. Okay, then it will be compiling your game now. So this demo will show you some physics functionality that is being applied into a game using GameMaker Studio. So we'll be waiting for the compilation, okay? Now, after compiling, it will be prompting up the window for your game. So this is an example of a game made out from GameMaker Studio that utilizes physics. So let's play this game. Okay, so this game is similar to Angry Birds. So let's say you have your projectiles in here. Okay. Okay, so that's an example of your game. So this game utilizes physics for its mechanic. Okay. So as you can see, the cat is hurdled from top and it will be pulled by the gravity itself onto the ground. Okay. So this is an example of your demo for GameMaker Studio. We have different types of demos for GameMaker Studio. It's up to you now how you're going to browse these demos. So I'll be closing this one. Okay. Okay, now let's proceed. We also have your tutorials. So for tutorials, this tab shows you a selection of tutorials that come with GameMaker Studio. So let's say, for example, let's say you're new with GameMaker Studio and you want to familiarize yourself, you can use these different types of tutorials, okay, to start up your knowledge in GameMaker Studio. Alright. Then we also have news. So this will display the most recent news from YoYo Games, and lastly, licenses. This tab will display the GameMaker Studio license as well as the various third-party licenses of products that are used for your GameMaker Studio. Okay now, so let's continue. So creating your first project. So to begin creating your first project, you can either click on the new project tab where you can select or either load a previous project or start a new one. So when starting a new one, you can provide the directory to save the project file to which the file be saved. So our file extension for your GameMaker Studio project will be .gmx, as well as assign a name to your new project. So clicking create will then create and save the initial project files. So okay, let's proceed. So this is the graphical user interface for your GameMaker Studio. So what are the parts of your graphical user interface? So you have your main menu, main toolbar, resource tree, search and filter. You have your compile target. Okay, you have your configurations, workspace, and compile window. So let's try to start to create your new file. So let's try. We'll click on the new tab. Okay. We'll add the project name. So let's say for example, sample project as your file name. Then click create. Then you will be prompted with the graphical user interface that we've shown previously. So in here you have your You have your resource tree, you have your main menus, you have your main toolbars. Okay. Now, so first that you need to check when starting your new project is regarding the target. Make sure that you select your target accordingly. So these are the different platforms that you can use to develop your game. So you can develop games for Windows, Mac OS, or a browser game using HTML5, iOS, Android, etc., etc. For at the moment, we'll be developing games for the Windows platform. Okay. So let's continue. So the resource tree. Here you will see a tree, view of all the resources in your game. Then you have your compile target. So these are the different platforms that you can use to compile your game or to create your games, as I've mentioned previously. So loading sprites. We'll be proceeding with sprites. Sprites are generally the visual representation of objects within the game you are creating. As such, a sprite is either a single image drawn with any drawing program you like. So you can create sprites using Adobe Photoshop, you can create sprites using Paint or Illustrator or any photo editing or any software that you want to create your sprites. There are a set of images that when played after one another looks like a looping animation. So for example, the following 10 images form a sprite for a character who is waving his arm while skydiving. So the actual finished animation will look like this when placed in a game. So I just resized this one for you to see the image better. So to create a sprite, choose the item create sprite from the resources menu or use the corresponding button on the toolbar. Either will cause the following window to open. So it will be prompting up this window in creating your sprite. So let's proceed with the software. Okay. So let me grab my magnifier. So now I'll be creating a sample with a sprite. So how are you going to do that? So you can proceed in here under your resource tree. You can click right or you can right click and create sprite, or you can click onto this button, the button that looks like a Pac-Man. So we'll be proceeding with create sprite. Okay, that this is the window that you'll be seeing for your creating sprite. Okay, so first thing is we'll be adding name for your sprite. So as much as possible, we use naming conventions in creating your sprite. So what you can do is, let's say for example, I'll be creating a sprite of a flying bird. So let's say the naming convention that I'll be using is after the name of the sprite, I'll be adding underscore SPI or SPR to denote that this resource is a sprite. Okay, so now you can load sprite or click this button, load sprite, then just select any image that you want to use. But for this example or for this demo, I'll be using or I predefined a sprite that I'll be using. Okay, okay, so I pre-created a sprite in here. So this is the sprite. So this is sprite that I'll be using. It's a series of images for a flying bird. So let's try to do this. Or so let's try to create this. So to create a sprite like that, so we'll be proceeding with edit sprite. I'll click edit sprite. Okay. Proceed on file, then I'll be creating a sprite from a strip. So the image that I've shown you previously, or this image is called the image sprite strip. Okay, so we'll be grabbing these images to create as a sprite. So click file, create from strip. Okay, then browse for your sprite. Okay, I'll be clicking on this one. So as you can see guys, this image I created this earlier this day. So it's a PNG image that doesn't have a background. So it's an image that consists of 10 unique images that will show the movement of the bird. So in here, loading a stripe from the image, you can modify the number of images. So let's say for example, I have 10 images in here that is separated into two rows. Okay. Now, Now, what we're going to do now is the selector. Okay, we'll be using this selector to select the 10 image the 10 image that we'll be using. So, uh, images for row is 5. Okay. Now I'll be defining the height and width of the image. So let's say for example, I did this using a 200 by 150 pixels width. Okay, so just drag this box in here to grab all those images. Okay, after doing that, just click OK. Okay, as you can see, your game maker now will automatically be grabbing those 10 images. It will be naming them consecutively from image 0 up until to image 9. Just click this check, okay, to proceed, and click OK. Now, so this is the image that will be prompted. So as you can see, I can play or I can select the image within that image stripe. So the animation will look something like this. Okay. So after doing that, just click OK. Then now you have your sprite now. So this is a sample sprite that we have now. So bird underscore SPR or your bird sprite. Okay. All sprite must have a name given to them so that you can identify them easily. Although you can should note that the actual name itself is really just a variable which holds a number that points to the resource. So it's best to give each sprite a descriptive name so that you can identify at a glance whether a particular resource is a sprite or an object or anything else. And many people do this by prefixing or suffixing the resource with the letters SPR that denotes sprite. So to load the sprite, click on the button Load Sprite. A special file dialog window opens in which you can choose the sprite you want to import into GameMaker Studio. Okay, so you'll also have options to make this image opaque, to remove its background, and to smoothen this image, or to smoothen its edges. So on the right, you have the preview of the image you select and some basic information about its size. Here we can also indicate a couple of things that you'd like GameMaker Studio to do when you import image, like make opaque, remove any transparent part, so remove the background color if it has one, make it transparent, or whether to smooth the edges of the sprite only if it's transparent, which can greatly improve its appearance. Okay, so after adding your sprites, we'll be proceeding to sound and music. So to add a sound resource to your game, use the resource menu or right-click on the resource tree and select create sound. Or you can use the corresponding button on the toolbar. Any of those will bring up the following window. So this is the sound properties window for GameMaker Studio. So in here we have several configurations for your sound file or your music file. So we have the file name, okay, the location of your file, okay, then the attributes if you want to use an uncompressed audio or compressed audio. Then you can also set the target that you want your audio to be during the game. So do you want your game to be in stereo or in mono? You can define it here. Define the sample rate and the bit rate for your audio. Now to load the sound, press the sound load button to the right of the sound name. A file selector dialog pops up in which you can select the sound file, which can only be either a WAV file or an MP3 file. So MP3 files should be used for background music, as GameMaker Studio only permits you to play one music track at a time. These files are much smaller than a WAV file would, but have a small CPU overhead as they have to be decoded before being played, hence the limit to only one MP3 file. Okay, so now let's proceed with your game maker. So this is your game maker now. So how do we add audios for your game? So to add a resource, we'll be proceeding with your resource tree. Okay, you can go in here, the sound, right click and create sound. So then it will be opening up your dialog window for your audio. So what we're going to do now is we need to locate your file that you want to add as your audio. So for example, I'll be adding a sound effect of, let's say, an explosion. Okay, I'll be clicking this button to load the file. Then you need to navigate where your file is or where your audio file is. So okay, so let's find your audio. So this is my sample audio. This is an example of a sound effects for explosion. Okay, I'll click open, then you'll be loading your file now. So for the attributes, it's up to you what type of compression are you going to use. So for uncompressed, not streamed in memory, okay, and low CPU usage. So for example, we'll be using compress to limit the file size of your audio. So let's say for example, you want to add multiple numbers of sound effects. I suggest you compress your files, okay, to limit the file size of your installer. So you can also edit the target options. Let's say for example, we'll be using stereo audio, okay, and you can change your sample rate and your bitrate. Now it's up to you how you're going to configure your audio. Once done, just click OK, then click OK again. Then now you have your audio within your resource tree. Okay. So for now, what we'll be doing is we'll be creating your resources for the moment. Okay. Then later we'll be using these resources to create a simple game. Okay. That's for your audio. Okay. Now, so let's continue. After the audio, you have your backgrounds. So these are usually large images that are used as backgrounds or foregrounds for the room in which the game takes place. But they can also be a large image composed of smaller ones called tiles, which you can then place individually on the room to create a complex visual image for levels with far less processing overhead that you would get with objects and sprites. So to create background resource in your game, use the create background option from the drop-down resources menu, or you can use the corresponding button on the toolbar. Either of those will cause the following window to open. So this is your background properties where you're going to define the settings or configurations for your background. So you must give a name to your backgrounds for reference within GameMaker Studio so you can identify them easily. So many people do this by prefixing or suffixing the resource with letters BG. For example, of the above image could be called BG underscore horizon or horizon.bg. Now, if you select load background, you will get the standard file selector where you can choose supported file images like PNG, GIF, BMP, JPG. And also tell GameMaker to make this image opaque. So you can select options to make this image opaque or remove its transparency or make it transparent. This takes the color from the bottom left corner corner pixel as the base color to make it transparent or to smoothen the edges. Now, so let's try to add your background in your GameMaker Studio. So this is your GameMaker now. Let's try to create a background. So first, I'll be deleting this what I previously created. So let's remove this one. So let's delete. Okay. Now, so what we're going to do now is we'll be adding your background. So you can just click your right click on your resource tree. Let's say for example, we'll be creating your backgrounds. Create background. Okay. Then we'll load an image. So let's say for example, let's load an image. I have a sample image in here. So okay, so I have this image now. I'll be using this image. Now, so this is the configurations for your background image. So you can edit it. The width and height of your background image will depend on the image itself. Okay. So once you're done, just click OK. Then you have your background. Oh, I forgot. We should rename all your resources, okay, based on the type of contents that they have. So let's say for example, I'll be renaming this to forest underscore BG to denote that this image is a background. Okay, so aside from that, the name denotes what's the content of this image. So for the sound, I'll also be doing that. So I'll be renaming this to explosion. Okay, so let's say I'll be using SND for the sound, and also I'll be renaming this sprite. So let's name, right click, rename, then this is let's rename this to bird underscore SPR to denote that this is a bird sprite. Let's continue. Okay, we also have objects. So when defining objects, with the resources you have seen so far, you can add some nice images and sound to the game resource tree, but they don't do anything, okay, in the game itself yet. So objects are a special resource that you use to control aspects of a game and do specific things. Most of the time, they have a sprite associated with them so that you can see them in the game room. But sometimes they are used as behind the scenes controller. So let's say, for example, you want to create a character. Okay, you want to create an enemy. Before doing that, we must create a sprite that you'll be assigning to your object. So basically, by default, objects are non-visible components of your GameMaker Studio. So in order for them to be visible on your game, we need to attach sprites or images to these objects. So they can be given behaviors and they can react to certain events as well as to each other. And most of the things you see in the game are based on objects and their interaction. So you don't actually place objects directly into the game room, but rather you place instances of these objects, which are basically copies of your object resource. So let's say, for example, objects are basically like blueprints of your characters or any components of the game that you have. So let's say, for example, you'll be creating an object that will be the blueprint. And once you place those objects into the game itself, we call them instances. Let's say, for example, you'll be creating an object of a rock. Okay, and a game can have multiple rocks. Okay, instead of creating multiple objects for that rocks, you can place multiple instances of the same object, like that rock. So you'll be creating a single rock as an object, then you'll be using that rock multiple times onto that object. Then we call those instances. So let's proceed to creating objects. So to create an object in your game, choose Create Object from the resource menu or click the equivalent button on the toolbar and the following window will open. So starting on the left, there is some general information about the object. Then in the middle, there is the list of events, okay, for the object and the window to place the actions that are performed to those events. And finally, on the right, there are actions themselves which you can select for the objects to perform. Group under different tabs for ease of use. Okay, now so let's proceed with GameMaker. Okay, so this is your GameMaker now. So let's start to create now your objects. So we'll be proceeding with objects. Okay, select the objects, create an object, then it will be opening the properties window for your object. So first thing that you want to do is you want to add a name for your object. So let's say, for example, we'll be creating an object for your bird. Okay, so I'll be using the file name bird underscore obj to denote that this resource is an object. And after that, you have the choice to add a sprite for this particular object. Now, it will depend if you want this object to be visible on the game or to be not visible. So if you want this object to be not visible, you will not be adding any sprite for it. But if you want it to be visible, make sure you add sprite. So as of the moment, we have this bird underscore sprite. So I'll be assigning this sprite for this particular object. So I'll be clicking this button and I'll be selecting bird underscore SPR. Okay. So here below, you have several properties that you can use. So you have solid, persistence, and uses physics. So later we'll be discussing them. So for the parts of your object, so in here you have a column for the events. Okay, so events are basically triggers that will be executing actions once they are triggered or satisfied. Let's say, for example, what are the type of events that you can use? So you can add event in here. Okay, once you've clicked that, these are the different type of categories that you can add for your object. So usually we add the create. Okay, we add the create event for your object. So basically, once the game started, your GameMaker Studio now will be creating this object. Okay, so let's say, for example, after create, you can also add different types of events. So let's say, for example, you can add mouse click events, okay, or mouse events. So we can have left button, right button, okay, left press. So let's say, for example, you want to trigger an action once your object is clicked. So you'll be clicking either your left press, right press, or middle press. So let's say, for example, we'll be using left press. So once you've added your events now, then you can proceed to creating your actions. Okay, so what are these actions? These actions will be the corresponding codes that will be performed once these events are triggered. So let's say, for example, if your object is left press, what type of execution you want it to do. So let's say, for example, you want to move that particular object, okay, so you can select these categories in here. So as you can see, you have these categories for your action. So we have move, main to, etc., etc. So if you want to use this type of actions, all you need to do is to drag them in here. So let's say, for example, you want your object to move from one place to the other place, then we'll be selecting this. All you need to do is to drag this one, then it will be opening its properties. So let's say, for example, you can define the particular space within the room where you want your object to move. So you'll be defining its x and y coordinates in here. So as of the moment, we'll leave this as blank. For now, I'll be showing you how to create the resources, and once we've completed all these resources, then we'll be proceeding in creating a simple game that will be using all of these resources. Okay? So let's continue. People use prefix or suffix to identify the differences between resources, like let's say, for example, obj underscore ship. If you have an object, if you have a ship object, it's either you can use prefix or suffix. Make sure that you'll be adding the obj prefix or suffix to denote that that resource is an object. So next, you can choose the sprite for the object should you wish to have it. If you do not have the appropriate sprite there yet, you can click the button U to create a new sprite resource and edit it as you wish, just as you had created the resource through the standard creation options. But what I recommend is, before creating your objects, first you must plan what are the different objects that you'll be using for the game that you'll be using. Okay, then prepare all the sprites before creating the objects. Okay, as much as possible, we want to create your sprites before you start your objects. You can use different types of softwares in creating your sprites. So you can use Adobe Photoshop, okay? You can use Adobe Illustrator, or you can use Paint, or any software that you want to use that could produce images. Okay, as much as possible, we want your sprites to be ready before creating your objects. So additional object properties. So these are the checkboxes that I've shown you previously. Okay, so we have your visible, solid, persistence, and uses physics. Okay, so the first one, we have solid. So by checking solid, you are indicating to GameMaker Studio that it should be considered, it should consider instances of this object to be a solid object, like a wall. Collision with instances of solid objects are treated differently from collisions with non-solid objects, as much as you are strongly advised to use solid only for objects that are not moving. So let's say, for example, your game will be needing walls. Okay, if you want those walls to be not moving, then make sure that you select the solid option or property for that object. Next, we have depth. You can also set the depth of the instances of an object, which basically controls whether they go below or above other objects or other depths. So when instances are drawn on the screen, they are drawn in order of depth, with instances that have the highest depth being drawn first, and instances with the lowest depth being drawn last. The following images or image illustrates this behavior. So let's say, for example, we have 3 images in here. Okay, so we have this purple, let's say, rock. We also have a cross in here and a black rock. So they have different values for their depth. So let's say, for example, this one will have a depth of 1000. Okay, this cross will have a depth of 0, and this one will have the depth of -500. The values you assign for the depth will define, okay, which object will be drawn first or will be drawn last. We also have persistent objects. A persistent object is one that does not go away when the room is changed, but rather it persists and it is carried over into the new room. It will only disappear when you explicitly destroy it, either with the destroy action or a code. So most of the time we'll be using, let's say, scoreboards, okay, or the scoring system. If you want to add, or will be adding we'll be using scoring numbers, okay, and we'll be using them as persistent objects because you want your scores to be visible across all the rooms within the game. Parent. Every object in the game can have a parent object. When an object has a parent, it can share code, actions, and events with that parent. So this is called inheritance. An object that has a parent, that parent is called a child. So what's the purpose of parent? So basically, let's say you can create a parent object, okay, then add all those events that you want and actions. Once you've created an object that is a child of that parent, it will inherit all of its events and actions. It saves you time in creating events and actions for all those objects. Let's say, for example, you'll only be doing the events and actions once, but you can place or you can use those events and actions multiple times by creating a parent object and a child object. We also have information. So this button shows information, gives an overview of all information of the object that can also be printed out or saved as an HTML file. Then aside from that, we also have use physics. When you create or when you check this box, you're telling GameMaker Studio that this object should be a part of physics world. This will also open another part of the window where you can define the physical properties of all instances for this object. So most of the time, we'll be using gravity, okay, if we'll be using this option. So we'll be defining the gravity or how gravity works within your game. Next, we have creating rooms. All games that you make in GameMaker Studio need at least one room to run, but you can have many more. And the room is just a place where you place your instances of the objects that you make up your game. So when you first create a room in your resource tree, you will be presented with a new window in which to edit its properties. So this is the user interface that will be prompted when creating your room. So these are the configurations, or these are the options that you can use for your properties. So let's say, for example, in here you have your tabs. So for the tabs, you have background, views, etc., etc. So let's check this one by one. So the first that we have is the toolbar. At the top of the form, there is a toolbar which has a number of buttons that refers to different actions in the room editor. So those buttons will be confirm, undo, instance actions, grid snap, visualization, zoom control, instant order, and shortcuts. So the first one, confirm. Clicking this button will close the room editor and save any changes you have made. Undo. This is a simple one-level button. By one level, we mean that only the last action performed will be undone. Instance actions. These buttons allow you to change certain properties of the instances in the room. So specifically, clearing all instances from the room, shifting all instances a set amount along the X and Y axis of the room. So locking instances and unlocking instances. We also have your grid snap. These values can be changed to make instances snap to a different grid resolution. A value of 0 will switch snapping off. Visualization. By clicking this, you will open a drop-down menu where you can switch on or off the visualization of many rooms element. Zoom controls. The main view of the room editor can be zoomed in and out to show more or less detail, either using these controls or by scrolling the mouse wheel. Instance order. Both of these buttons will bring up separate window, with the first giving you the option to change the order in which instances are created at the room start, and the second shows the available keyboard shortcuts that you can use when editing rooms. We also have the minimap. So you can imagine this is a miniature representation of the whole room. So you can click and drag the current area on the minimap and the main view will scroll and pan to match, or you can just click on the minimap to have a main view jump to that position. The info bar. While placing tiles and instances within a room, you often need extra information about them at a glance. For that, you have the info bar, which shows the current mouse position within the room, the ID, the object index of the instance that the mouse is currently over, and further context-sensitive information like whether the instance has code or not in its room create event. The tabs. At the left, you will see 6 tabs that open separate sub-pages in the area of the left. But in the section, we will only deal with 3 most important ones. So the settings, the background tab, and the objects tabs. Further information on these tabs can be found at the sections below. Now we'll be proceeding to the game that we'll be creating. So after demonstrating all the basic components that you'll be needing for creating a simple game, okay, we'll be or I'll be showing you a simple game and how to create it. But before we proceed in the creation of that game, let's check the overview of the game that I'll be doing as an example. So the name of the game is Catch the Clown. So Catch the Clown is is a little action game. In this game, a clown moves around in a playing field. The goal of the player is to catch the clown by clicking with the mouse on him. So if the player progresses through the game, the clown starts moving faster and it becomes more difficult to catch. For each catch, the score is raised and the goal is to get the highest possible score. So this is your overview. So we'll be proceeding to the simple game design document. So we'll be specifying what are the contents and mechanics of the game in here. So the first one, we have your game objects. There will be just two game objects. So that will be the clown and the wall. So the wall object has a square-like image. The wall surrounding the player area is made out of these objects. The wall object does nothing. It just sits there to stop the clown from moving out of the area. So the clown object has the image of a clown face. It moves with a fixed speed. Whenever it hits a wall object, it bounces. So when the player clicks on the clown with the mouse and the score is raised with 10 points. The clown jumps to a random place at the speed and the speed is increased with a small amount. Next, we have sounds. We will be using 2 or 3 sounds. So we'll be using 3. So a bounce sound that is used when the clown hits the wall. Click sound that is used when the player manages to click the mouse on the clown, and will also be providing a background music for the game. We also have controls. The only control the player has is in the mouse. So clicking the left mouse button on the clown will catch it. So gameplay. So at the start of the beginning, the score is set to 0. The room with the moving clown is shown. The image or the game immediately begins. When the player presses the key, the game ends. Okay? Levels. There are just one level. So the difficulty of the game increases because of the speed of the clown increases after each successful catch. So let's proceed in creating the Catch the Clown game. So first, let's open your GameMaker Studio. Then click on to New. Okay. Then we'll be adding the project name for the game that we'll be making. So let's say, for example, first game. Okay, so we'll be naming this project to first game, and I'll click create. Then you'll be prompted with a blank project for your GameMaker Studio. So the first thing that we're going to do is we'll be adding your resources like sprites and your sounds. So first, let's try to create your sprite. So in your resource tree, select on sprite and click right click, then create sprite. So the first sprite that we'll be adding for now is your wall. So I'll be adding the name wall underscore SPR, okay, for your wall sprite. So SPR denotes that this resource is a sprite. So let's load the sprite. Okay, navigate where are your resources. So let's say, for example, in here I have prepared the resources that I'll be using. So I have 2 folders in here. So one folder for the sound, okay, and one folder for the sprite. I have prepared 3 audio files in this particular example and 2 sprites. Okay, one for the clown and one for the wall. So for now, I'll be selecting clown and then click open. Okay, so after that, just click OK. Then you now have your sprite for the wall. Now we'll be proceeding with creating the second sprite. So same procedure on the resource tree. Right click your sprite, create sprite. Then we'll be naming this sprite to clown underscore SPR. Now we'll be loading your clown sprite. Okay, then click open. So in this particular example, we'll be changing the origin point. So we want to change it to center. So why are we changing the origin point? Because this sprite later will be rotating. So we want the rotation to happen at the center of your image. Now after that, we'll be modifying your mask. Okay, so in here, we'll be changing the shape of the mask. So you have different shapes for your mask. Okay, so you can use diamond, okay, ellipse, rectangle, and precise. Now, what is the purpose of this mask shape? So this will be used as your collision mask. Okay, your objects later will be colliding based on the shape that you define in here. So let's say, for example, for now, I'll be defining it to be an eclipse. Okay, just click OK. Now, then, we'll proceed to, or we'll click OK, then we'll be proceeding to the audio. Now, so I have mentioned earlier, I have prepared 3 audios for this project. So let's first create the first sound. So first is, I'll be creating the bounce. Okay. Bounce sound. Okay. So once the clown hits the wall, we'll be triggering the bounce sound. Okay. So let's load the audio. Okay. So I have 3 um, 3 files in here, so I'll be selecting bounce. Okay, then click OK. Now, after doing that, just click OK, then we're good to go. Next, we'll be creating the second audio. So this audio will be now your click audio. So once the user clicks on the clown or clicks anything or clicks the clown in the game, so we'll be triggering this audio. So we'll load the audio. So this is the click audio. Just click open. Okay. Now, in terms of creating or in terms of preparing your audio for the game, as much as possible, you want to limit your background audio to an MP3 file and your sound effects to WAV files. Okay. We'll click OK, then we'll be adding your last audio. So this is now your background music. So rename this to background underscore SMD or sound. Let's add your background. Okay, then click OK. Now, so as you can see, we have created the sprites and the sounds that you'll be needing for this game. The next thing that we'll be doing now is we'll be creating your objects. So in the resource tree, select on right click, create an object. For this game, we'll be needing 3 objects. Okay, so that will be the object for the wall, object for your clown, and 1 object for the controller. I'll be explaining the purpose of controller later on. So for now, we'll be creating the object for your wall. So let's rename this object from object 0 to wall underscore obj. As I have mentioned earlier, we are adding prefixes to denote what type of resource is this. So okay, so once you created your or you have renamed the object, we'll be assigning a sprite for this object. So we have pre-created 2 sprites that will be the wall SPR and clown SPR. So we'll be assigning the wall SPR to be the sprite of this object. So before we proceed, make sure to select the checkbox for solid. We want your object to be non-moving, okay? To be a solid object within the game. So make sure you select this checkbox, then click on OK. Now, so after that, we'll be proceeding now to the next object that we have. So we will be creating your clown object. So let's rename this object to clown underscore obj. Okay, then we'll be assigning your clown sprite. Okay, so for this example, we won't be creating this as a solid object because we want this object to be moving around your game. Okay, so the next thing that we'll be adding for this object is we'll be starting to add your events and the actions that will be triggered or that will be executed once those events are satisfied. So the first event that we'll be creating now will be the creative event. So once we add the object onto your room and the game is initiated, we want this object to be created. Okay, so we'll be selecting the event for your or for the we'll be selecting the create event, okay, for the first event. Then we'll be adding actions. Now, so what will be happen now is here. So when the game starts, we want your clown to be created onto the game and we want it to move. Okay, so we'll be, or you can proceed to the move tab. Then you can see here under the move category this button. This is move fix. So to use this action, all you need to do is to drag this one onto the actions list. So once you've selected or once you've dragged an action onto the actions list, you'll be prompted with the properties for that particular action. So let's say, for example, once the game starts, we want your object, which is the clown, to move into all directions. Okay, so whatever directions will it be, we'll be selecting all these directions. Now, so after that, we'll be changing its speed to 4. So, okay, you'll be defining the speed of the clown on how fast does it move onto your room. Okay, then we'll click OK. So after adding the action for your create event, we'll be proceeding to the next event. Okay, so the next event is collision. So we'll be defining in here in what object do you want your clown to be colliding. So we'll be colliding your clown into the wall object. So I'll be selecting wall.obj. Okay, then so what will happen if your clown collides with the object or collides with the wall object? You want it to bounce. So to do that, we'll be proceeding to the move tab. Okay, this is your move tab. Then I'll be selecting bounce. Okay, now so the most important properties that you want to define in here is you want your object to bounce against solid objects. So we've predefined the wall object earlier that this wall object is a solid object. Okay, so we'll be colliding that into the wall. So make sure that the value for against is set to solid objects. Then just click OK. So after doing that, okay, once the object bounce onto the wall, we want to play your audio. So to play an audio, proceed to main 1 tab, then you'll see this action. So this is your play sound. So drag this onto the actions list, then we'll be defining the audio that you want to play when the clown hits the wall. So that will be your bounce sound. Okay, so just click this one, then below you have your loop property. So make sure that this is false. Okay, you don't want to loop that audio, so you want that audio to play just once. Okay, just click OK. Then so as of the moment, we have 2 objects that we have created. Okay, so we'll be proceeding to the next event that we'll be adding. So the next event is the left click. So once the user left clicks onto the clown, what actions will be executed? So first, we'll be adding your event. So click on the add event button, then we'll be proceeding to mouse. Once you've clicked the mouse button or the mouse option, so it will be prompted you with a list of different events that you can use. So let's say, for example, we'll be using this event. So left press. So select onto this one, then the event will be now created. So what we're going to do now is we'll be defining the action. So first thing that we want to do is we want to register a score. Okay, so once the user clicks onto the clown, we want to add 10 to its score. Now to do that, proceed to the score tab. Okay, you have this button in here, or you have these different actions in here. So you have your set action or set score, sorry. Then we also have test score and your draw score. So for this particular example, we'll be adding your set score. So for the scores, for each time the user clicks on to the clown, we'll be defining or we'll be adding 10 to its score. Now we have a checkbox in here below which says relative. So meaning the scores will add up if you check onto this relative. If you don't check onto this, the scores will be just set to 10. So let's say, for example, the user clicks on the clown, it will be changing its score to 10. So, and if he or she clicks it again, okay, it will be just changed to 10. It won't add up. So make sure that we check onto this relative. Then click OK. The next one that we're going to do now is we'll be adding music. Okay, so or want to add sound. So once the user click onto the clown, we want the game to play a sound. So we'll be proceeding to adding the sound. Okay, so we have your play sound action in here as we created earlier. So drag this one onto your actions list. Okay, then we'll be defining the audio that we want or the sound that we want to play. So that will be your click sound. Okay, then make sure the loop is false. We don't want to loop this audio. And click OK. So after doing that, okay, what's next? Now, we want your clown to move at a random location onto the map. Okay? So, every time the user clicks the clown, we want it to jump to one particular location within the room. Okay? It should be random. So, to do that, we'll be proceeding to move. Okay? Then, we have this action. So, we have jump action. Okay? We have jump to start. Then, we also have your jump to random. We'll be using this jump to random. Jump to random. So, we'll be dragging this onto your actions list. Okay? Then, for the moment, we'll have to delete or we'll have to leave this as default. Okay? Just click OK. So it will automatically be assigning random values for the horizontal and vertical location of your sprite. Then we'll click OK. Okay, so once the clown move onto that particular location, we want that clown to be moving again into a certain direction. So we'll be adding your move fix. So we'll be adding the 8 directions in here. Okay, then we'll be changing its speed from 1. We defined previously the speed to be 4, but this one, okay, we'll be doing it or we'll be checking the relative checkbox, meaning every time the user left press, okay, or clicks onto the clown will move into a random direction within this sets of location, okay, and it will be adding 1 to its speed every time you click it. So every time you click the clown, the speed will increase, okay, it will be faster and faster up until you can't click the clown anymore. Then we'll click OK. Then after that, so let's try to create now your room and let's check what will be the output of this game. Okay, so we'll click OK. Then we'll be proceeding to creating your room. Okay, now, so let's create the room. Now, to create the room, you can proceed to the resource tree. Right click on to the rooms, then create room. Okay, so the first thing that you want to modify in here will be the settings. Proceed to settings tab, then let's rename this. So we'll be renaming this to main underscore RM or room. So for the moment, we'll be leaving the height and width of your room to be 640 by 480, but you can change it depending on your preference. So as of the moment, the current speed or the number of instructions that will be executed for the game will be in 30. So meaning every seconds there will be 30 steps or 30 instructions that can be performed onto this room. Okay. Now we'll be proceeding next to your objects. So what we're going to do now. So after adding your room now, we'll be defining what will be the look of the room that you're going to create. So what we're going to do now is we'll be adding your walls. Okay. You'll be designing the walls depending on the design that you want. So for this particular example, we'll be surrounding the whole room with walls. So for the clown not to be able to go outside the room. So to do that, select on your object. So click on wall object, then just left click onto your room. So it will be automatically drawing the objects for your, or it will be automatically creating the instance for your wall. So let's say for example, I'll be designing this wall like this. Then if you want to recreate this example, it's up to you on how you're going to design this. Okay. Okay, to remove excess instances, select on right click, then just click on delete. Okay. So I'll be just moving this walls. Okay, now let's try to run your game. So we already have your room. So for the moment, your room consists multiple instances of your wall. So let's add your clown now. So select onto the clown object, then left click here onto the room. Then let's try to run your sample game. So to run that, you have this button in here. So run game, just click onto this button, then it will be compiling now your game. So after a few moments, there will be a pop-up window of the game that you have designed. So you'll just have to wait. Okay, so after the compilation, now this is your sample game. As you can see, your clown now moves into a certain direction and it bounces off from the wall. Okay, so let's try to click this one. So once you click the clown, okay, it will be moved randomly into a separate location within your room. So this is the initial results of our game. So as of the moment, okay, this is just a preview. So we're not done yet. We'll be adding more, or we'll be adding an additional object and a few more events and actions for this game. Okay. So after seeing the preview, okay, so next what we're going to do is we'll be changing the behavior of your clown. So as of the moment, the clown changes its direction when it hits the wall. So to add the behavior, what we're going to do is we want the clown to move into a random direction without hitting the wall every 2 seconds. To achieve that, we'll be using alarms. So alarms are basically like countdown timers in GameMaker Studio. So to do that, we'll be proceeding to your clown object. Okay. So we have two types of alarm that we'll be adding in here. So the first one is the action alarm and the second one is the event or the alarm event. So first one, select onto the create event. Okay. Proceed to main 2, select on set alarm. Okay. Then drag it onto the actions list. In here, we'll be creating your alarm and we'll be defining the number of steps. So in GameMaker, by default, we have 30 steps executed for the game. So if we want our alarm to be executed every 2 seconds, we need to multiply that 30 steps to 2. So that will be 60 steps. Meaning this alarm will go off every 3 seconds. So we'll click on OK. Okay, then we'll be proceeding to the next step. The next step is to create your alarm event. So we can proceed to clicking your add event, selecting onto the alarm. Okay, so we'll be naming that alarm to alarm 0. So as you can see previously, in this set alarm 0 to 60, it defines that your alarm will, or the 60 steps will alarm onto alarm 0. As of the moment, we don't have, or we didn't create the alarm 0 as of the moment. So to create that, we'll be proceeding to events, alarm, and let's select alarm 0. Okay. Now, so in this alarm, what will be the actions that we'll be adding? So we'll be changing the direction of your clown every 2 seconds. Okay, without hitting the wall. So to do that, we'll be adding your move fix. Okay, so we'll be defining the 8 directions wherein the clown can use. Okay, we'll leave its speed to 0, but we'll be selecting this relative box. Then we'll click OK. Now, the next one is we'll be setting your alarm now. So let's add your alarm. Okay, the number of steps will be 60. Then will be alarming in this alarm 0. So what it will be doing is it will be creating a loop. Okay, every 60 seconds, it will be executing this alarm. Then after that one, it will be executing the alarm that we did earlier, so on and so forth. Okay, so it will become a loop. Meaning your clown now will move directions every 2 seconds without hitting the wall. So just click on OK. Okay, so after doing that, we'll be adding your transform sprite. So we can proceed to main 1. Okay, then we'll be finding your transform. So this transform sprite will be using this action to redirect the direction of your clown while moving into a certain location. Okay, so we'll be changing its angle to direction. So let's say, for example, your clown is moving from left to right. The head of the clown, okay, will be pointing onto the left side because it will be going to that side. Okay, so we'll be changing its angle to or angle to direction. It will depend on where the direction of the clown is moving on to. So just click on to OK. Okay. Now, the next event that we'll be doing, or the next step we'll be doing now, is we want to copy this transform sprite onto all of your events. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we'll be adding this transform sprite action. So we'll copy this one, Control C, and we'll be pasting it onto all of these events. But you need to make sure that you'll be adding this action after start moving in a direction. Okay, so I'll be selecting this start moving into a direction. I'll select right click and paste it in here. I'll also be adding it onto my wall object. Okay, or to the left press. So select on to start moving into a direction and paste this. Okay, so after pasting the transform sprite, we'll be just setting the sequence per action. So we'll be moving the start moving in a direction above the transform sprite. Okay, then we'll also be adding the transform sprite onto your wall object. Okay, so we'll be adding it here. So onto the alarm, I'll be moving the start moving direction before your transform the sprite, and for create will be moving your transform sprite below, and this set alarm to 0 to the to be the first action. Okay, we'll click OK. Okay, then we'll try to run your game now. So click on to the run game button. Then let's wait for its compilation. Okay, so this is the sample now. As you can see, your clown now will be moving its direction without waiting to hit the wall. Okay, it will also be changing its direction when it hits the wall. So basically, we have two means where the clown moves into a particular location. The first one will be when it hits the wall, and the second one is the alarm that goes off every 2 seconds. Okay, so this is your clown now. Okay, the position of your clown now will vary depending on the direction where it goes. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do now, so the action for your clown is, I think, okay. Now we'll be proceeding with the next object that we'll be creating. So the next event that we'll be creating will be the control object. So we'll be naming this object to control underscore obj. So for now, we won't be adding sprite for this one because what's the purpose of this control object? We'll be using this object to play the background audio and to display the score. Okay, now how are we going to do that? So the first one is upon adding the name, okay, we'll be adding the event. So the event is create. For the create, we want to play its audio. So we want to play your background music. So you can proceed to main 2, then select this play sound, drag it onto your actions list, and select the audio that you want to use. So I've defined previously this background underscore SND resource. Okay, this is your background music now. I'll be selecting this one, and I'll be changing the value of this loop from false to true. So this audio particularly, its duration is 3 minutes if I'm not mistaken. But if you want to play the game for more than 3 seconds or 3 minutes, you want your audio to loop. Okay, just click OK. Then we'll be proceeding to the drawing of your score. So to do that, it will require a separate event. Okay, so we'll be selecting add event. We'll be proceeding to draw. Okay, then we'll draw. Okay, so this is your draw event now. We'll be proceeding to score. Then in here, you have your set score, test score, and draw score. So we'll be using draw score for this particular instance. Okay, so once we've dragged the draw score onto the actions list, you'll be defining the X and Y coordinates where you want the score to be displayed. So let's say, for example, we want to display it on the upper left corner. So I'll be using the 64, 64 for the coordinates. It's up to you where you want your score to be located. Just change the X and Y coordinates of your score. Okay? Then we have your caption. So we'll let this at default. Okay, so score. Then click OK. So after creating the objects and the events, so click OK, and we want to draw this onto your room. So let's proceed to the room. So double click your main room. Okay, so this is your main room now. Then we'll be adding your control OBJ onto the room. So click control OBJ and click it anywhere onto the room. It doesn't matter where you drag it because we already predefined that the score should be located onto the upper left corner using the X and Y coordinates. Okay, and we won't be using any sprite, so you won't be seeing an image in here. It will all be displaying the text score and the current score of the game. Okay, so just click OK to save this form, and let's try to run your game again. Okay guys, so this is your game now. So as you can see, we already have your scoreboard in here. So your score started at 0, and as you can hear, the background music is already playing for your game. Okay, so now every time that we click your clown, it adds your score. So every click corresponds to 10 points. So the more you click, the more you score that you're getting. And as you can see, the higher the number of score, the faster the clown goes. Okay, so every time that you click your clown, it adds 10 to your score, and it adds 1 to the speed. So that will be all for module 4. Okay guys, so if you have additional questions regarding module, kindly send me a private message onto my Facebook account. All the resources that I have used for this project, so the sprites, the sound, and the project file itself, I'll be giving you a copy. Okay guys, so if you have any questions, send me a PM. Okay, so goodbye. Thank you.